Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Art of Hunting podcast. Today, I'm going to sit down solo, and we're going to talk about magazine covers. I've got a new cover dropping with Field & Stream. Here's a little bit about how I approach a cover, the process, and why they're special. Hope you enjoy this episode. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Art of Hunting podcast. We're going to do a solo episode. Sometimes we have guests on here. A lot of times we have guests on here, actually. And then, anytime we have any sort of a scheduling conflict or we're in between, I like to do some solo ones and really sort of unpack what's going on behind the scenes here in my studio. So today we are going to go over covers, magazine covers. I just finished up the first issue of the new Field & Stream magazine, which was a really cool project, and I'm happy to be a part of that. It was a brook trout. And it was a really great project. A lot of times I like taking on some things that stretch me a little bit, maybe new subject matter or a new fresh approach at something, and that was it. So it's should be out now. You guys can learn a lot more about that. You'll be seeing a lot more of it. But today I wanted to go over really the cover process, some of the history of magazine covers, why they're important to creatives, how they're done, and a little bit more behind the scenes. Because most of the time, when you get a magazine, you just look at the cover. But there's a lot more that goes into it behind the scenes. So, first, let's talk about some old school covers. The Field & Streams and Outdoor Lives of the world have been historically the ones that ran art on the covers. And art actually started on these covers because they didn't have any better option. Photography wasn't at a point yet where they could really do what they can do today. So back in the day, one of my favorite artists, Carl Rungius, he was commissioned by some of the natural sciences museums in New York and stuff to go out west and paint elk, sheep, mountain goats, rams, all that kind of stuff, and come back to show people what an elk looked like. Like, we didn't have any good full color photography. You couldn't Google a picture of a bighorn sheep and see what that looked like. So they sent artists actually into the bush, into the wilderness, to depict them. What they would do is he'd actually hunt them. They'd shoot them. They might string them up by ropes, or he'd do some sketches of them on the ground, but he had to depict what that animal looked like from the hoof to the end of his antlers, and then take those back, and they would display those in some of these national museums. And so artists back in the day have always played a role of sometimes physically showing people what these look like. As we got further down the road, they played more of a role in showing the adventure, the spirit of the West. Winchester has some of the coolest old covers of, guys getting interrupted in their camp by a bear, or going around the corner of a bend in the river on a canoe to shoot a moose. And a lot of these old school artists, they told that story through their art. And it also appeared on the covers of magazines because the producers and the editors of the magazine really wanted people to be inspired, and they really wanted people to see their magazine cover and be happy and see something cool, something that resonated, and want them to either buy it at newsstands or flip it open and see the contents of the inside. So a lot of emphasis was put on the cover. And as modern photography got really good, we started going away from art on the covers. And, one of the reasons I feel like is it's a lot of work to create art for a cover. Not that photographers don't do a ton of work. They spend hundreds and thousands of hours out there trying to capture the image, a cover-worthy image. And that's really hard with wildlife sometimes. But the speed of photography can move quick. Photographers can submit a few hundred images for submissions on the cover. So the editors have, thousands of images at their disposal to choose what they want for a cover. And creating a fine art piece is a much more slower process. You don't have as many images to choose from. commissioning a piece like I do, it takes more time, takes more planning, and so you don't have the amount of options to choose from. And as production times got faster, as modern photography got better, as more people started getting into photography, I think that's where we saw a lot of the change in magazines going to photography. And there's some great advantages to photography too. You can change it digitally. You can take away the background. You can make the backgrounds go lighter or darker. There's a lot of things that you can do with those. So the covers always had a high emphasis because when you started selling them at newsstands, you wanted something striking that would encourage people to pick up that magazine amidst the 40, 50 other magazines on the rack. Just picture an airport newsstand. And what can you run on a cover that makes people want to pick up your magazine? And as a part of that, also, the designers of the magazines put a lot more emphasis into the covers. So when I was working for the Turkey Federation, we would kind of rotate. We would have two or three designers to produce a magazine. And, one person would do the cover and 1/3 of it. Another person would do a third. Another person would do a third. And so I didn't do every cover, but I did quite a few of them. And you work with the editors to decide what photo is going to be on the cover, what the cut lines are going to be, what the color scheme is going to be. And a lot of times they would pick a photo for you. A lot of times the designer would have a lot of say in what photo ran on the cover. But regardless, even back in those days, it was a big project. I keep going back to that. It's a big project. There's a lot of emphasis that goes into that cover. The reason it was important for creatives is it was more exposure to have your work on the cover. It paid more. So, it might pay double or triple what a photo would run on the inside. And so a lot of photographers really set out trying to get their work on a cover. And it was kind of like an attaboy to have your work on the cover. So all that to say that magazine covers have played an important part in the hunting industry and the culture around hunting for years. What happened was, as we have gotten away from all things printed, podcast, video, social media content, a lot of things has gone digital as the world has gone digital. And a lot of these magazines have gone away. When I was working for the Turkey Federation or some of these other nonprofits, it's a different world when you have an organization that is paying the bills for the magazine. So, for example, at the Turkey Federation, the magazine was basically funded by the Turkey Federation. So people would donate, they'd raise money at auctions, at banquets, and that one of the things that they did is help pay for the production of that magazine. And that magazine was used as an outreach tool to help educate and inform hunters and talk about what was going on at the Turkey Federation. So, and you still see that today. NRA has several publications. Ducks Unlimited has one. Rocky Mountain Elk. A lot of these nonprofits still have one. A lot of these bigger organizations still have one. What you have seen, though, is they almost don't sustain themselves financially. It's really hard to do these days. So some of these magazines that are for-profit magazines, you have to pay the editors, pay the designers, pay everybody. You have to pay the printer to produce it. And then at the end of the day, that thing still has to be profitable. It has to make money. Nothing else is propping up the cost of that magazine like in these other groups. So there's a lot more pressure on your newsstand publications, okay? A lot of these other nonprofits, like I've been talking about, were done. They're subscription-based. You join the Turkey Federation, you get their magazine. When you have to sell a magazine at newsstand to pay your bills, there's a lot more pressure on that. And you have to sell the advertising, and the advertising is what pays for the production of that stuff. If advertisers decide they're going to spend all of their money on social media or Google ads instead of running print ads in a magazine, that cuts into the budget of that magazine. And you can slowly see how these things sort of tumbled and have started to fall apart. And so we have seen a big drop in print magazines. Now they're starting to come back a little bit. Field and Stream was bought by some investors. I don't know all the details of it, but Eric Church and Morgan Wallen were two of them. And they have decided they're going to bring Field and Stream back. They're going to rebrand it. They're going to make it cool again. They're going to bring a lot of new, exciting stuff to it. And they asked me to paint their first cover as a part of that first magazine. So that's the one that we just wrapped up. I do want to talk about the magazine production the cover production process and what I've been a part of over the years. But my latest one is the Field and Stream cover. That's the new one, and that's the most recent one, and that's why we're doing this episode of the podcast today. So my first cover was actually a Turkey Call magazine cover, and I've got it here with me, and it's terrible. Looking back on it, I'm always my own worst critic of my work, but this is one I did when I was working at the Turkey Federation, and it is 3 turkeys that I sketched on paper, then scanned in, and then I took it into a program, I think it was called Corel Paint back then, and digitally painted it. And, it's all right. It's kind of cool. The turkey's bodies are way too big. There's too many feathers. It's kind of an odd pose. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I remember thinking it was really cool at the time. Not only to do an art cover, because nobody was doing that back in the early 2000s, but also it was just something different, something unique for me. I've had art picked on a few other covers since then, and then I've also had a series of outdoor life covers that hang in my studio now. And the way those work is a lot of people don't realize this about print media or products or anything like that, but by the time you see it at newsstands or in a store, it's been worked on for months. And, a lot of times I have to work well ahead of the production date, of the press date. I have to work long in advance of that. And most times by the time it hits newsstands, I've looked at it so much I don't even want to see it again. But it is cool when other people see it for the first time and they're all excited about it and they're pumped. It's fresh to them. It's new to them. So that is kind of cool as an artist to see your work and see other people react to it. But for the most part, I've seen it so many times. I've revised it so many times that it's kind of old news to me. But what you do is you're going to start working probably 3 months ahead of the production schedule of the press date. And most of the copy for the magazine has been written by then. The features are planned out, the content's planned out. So if you're looking at like a May issue release date, most of that content was written and planned and done in January in the middle of winter. So you've got to work ahead a little bit. But I will start with rough sketches, rough ideas, and rough Photoshop mock-ups. And I would pitch these editors on, hey, there's a few different directions we could go here. Say it's a deer, okay? There's a few different directions we could go. We could have this deer jumping and put his rack up into the masthead on a dark background. We could have him running with a doe on a light background. We could have him making a scrape doing this. And here's some rough ideas of what that looks like. And then I'll talk with the editors, we'll revise, and we'll say, okay, we're going to go with a jumping deer on a dark background. Okay, that's my marching orders. Then I've got to find some reference photography or make it up on my own or take my own photos or whatever it is, and I've got to refine that concept, and then I'll pitch them on 5 or 6 other ideas. Then we'll pick one of those. After that, the writers will actually like drop in the copy. So they'll have like 5 best stand locations for the rut, okay? And they will actually put that copy in there with my rough mock-up. And so when you do a cover, the entire issue is planned. The entire cover is planned before I ever put a brush to canvas. I might have anywhere from 40 to 60 hours into a piece. And so the last thing you want to do is spend, a week and a half working on something, and then you've got to change it because the cover line's changed, or because we're going to go a new direction. We're going to do this, doing that. And so you've got to have all that baked, and those editors want to see what their cover is going to look like before I actually paint anything. So once we have that done, I'll have a final approval. I'll have a final approval on that process, and they will, give me the green light, and then I will just go mad scientist and go recluse and lock myself in my studio. And the next time that I communicate with them, I will have a high-res image of the painting, and I will set the painting up, light it, take the photography, create the digital image, tweak it based on what I know they need for their cover. That might mean we take the background dark so that they can put light type on top of it. May mean lightening or deleting the background altogether so they can put dark type on top of it. And as I'm looking at some of these covers here, all of them are done that way. It's either a light background with dark type or a dark background with light type. And again, remember, you've got to stand apart on newsstands, so you need that contrast. There's never any really in between. I will send it to them, and they will drop the high-res art into their cover as part of their production process. And usually that happens about a month before the press date. So we're about to go live with the Field and Stream cover. I think my date was April 15th for high-res art that we had to have it done and baked. So as you can tell, you take a week and a half of production time creating the digital file. You've got all the work ahead of that with the editors. I think we started right after CWE in late February, creating actual mock-ups for that. So you're looking at 2 months start to finish on a cover design. They will proof it in-house. They will send it off to their printer. They'll get proofs back, and they'll evaluate it for color. And then from there, the files get saved out and sent to the magazine. The printer will print it. They will bind it. And most of the printers these days will ship it too. So, say it's a 64-page catalog. Field and Stream will send off all 64 pages, and then it'll get printed, bound, and end up in mailboxes. So that's pretty much the whole process of a custom cover. I've had a few pieces of art selected for other covers, and basically that's just where the editor looks at your magazine, looks at your website, and decides, hey, this would make a cool piece for a cover art. Can we run with it? And that's not nearly as common for me, mainly because there's not as many magazines out there as there used to be. But the art on a cover has got to be simple. It's got to be clear. They've got to have room to run type around it. It's a very different type of image from a painting for the most part. So if you have a massive amount of detail and you're the kind of artist that paints every blade of grass all the way through the foreground and background, extreme amounts of detail are not going to make a good cover because, again, the type is going to compete with that. So most of the time, if you have a magazine or a publication reach out for a cover, it's because they like your style. It's because you paint simple. Your backgrounds are probably simple, or even black or white. So that pretty much gives you a behind the scenes on how it works. My favorite parts of a cover are working with the designers and editors. on a piece. I get to tap into my old design roots, designing covers when I was a graphic designer, coming up with an image that works with the masthead, that works with the type, that does all that kind of stuff. I like that. I like that a lot. My least favorite parts of the covers are the deadlines. So a lot of times they can change deadlines on you. They can shift up pretty quick. And so, that can be a challenge when you're trying to create new art and stay fresh when you're always on deadline. So, my favorite cover that I've ever done, I'm looking at them now. My favorite cover is probably the flying turkey that I did for the Turkey Federation. I can talk about that one a little bit. I wanted to do something different with them, and that cover featured a pose that I'd never seen before, and it was a turkey flying out at you like he just flown down off the roost. And I wanted to do something that fits well on the vertical format of a cover, but I'd never seen anybody else do before. So what I did is I actually took a scene, a reference photo of a pheasant, and if you take away the beard and the head and the tail, a lot of things are really similar about a pheasant and a turkey. Their proportions of their legs to their body, their wings are very similar. Their proportions are overall quite similar. And so what I did is I took the flying image of a pheasant and changed the tail, photoshopped a turkey's tail on. I actually hung a tail fan up in my studio and photographed it and put it on in a Photoshop mock-up, like a Frankenstein type image. Put the beard on, and then I actually bought a frozen head from Callie Morris's studio, just to look at, just a reference. So I took the flying turkey head that they have, and it's almost impossible to find a reference photo of a flying turkey at you. And I really wanted to see how it worked and how I could work this into my painting. So I bought the frozen, the freeze-dried head, and hung it on a nail on my easel, so I had a turkey's head looking at me the whole time. And that's what I used as reference to paint the head from. And so I combined those into a turkey image flying at you, and I think it turned out really well. I put it on a completely white background, so that they could have cover lines that really stood out well there. And, from there, the process was just as similar as all the rest. You photograph it, clip it out, provide them a digital file, and then they go to press with it. So that's really in a nutshell how covers work. I think that as an artist, obviously, it's a cool opportunity to have your work on a cover. It is an opportunity to inspire people, to show them something cool, and to help them engage with a cover art. It's an opportunity for the artist to help the magazine connect with their readers. And I feel like that's one of the coolest parts about it. And I feel like when you create that from scratch, rather than having them pick one of your images off of your portfolio site, I think that it's a little bit more rewarding for me because I'm part of the process. We're seeking out, instead of someone just saying, hey man, I think your art's cool, can we run it on a cover? It's more of we are bringing a magazine back and we want to connect with the viewers and we want you to help us do that. And so you're part of a larger project, a larger mission, rather than just, I created the cool deer that would look good on a cover. And out of all the things about doing cover work that I like, I think that's the one that I like the most. I think that's the aspect of it that I like the most. So with that, we're going to wrap this podcast up quick. Check out the new Field and Stream cover. You have to be a member, I believe. I don't believe you can get it at newsstands. So check them out. This is a really cool cover. I like it. It's a jumping brook trout. We actually took an old school cover and I remade it in kind of my style. So that's how that one's going to work. The old cover is going to go on the back and the new cover on the front. So this has been a really fun project. I hope you guys enjoy it, and stay tuned. I promise we're going to have more guests on, not just going to be me talking about stuff. So I appreciate you guys following along, and hope you've had a great turkey season so far, and enjoy it. One thing that we have new is we have some new canvas prints available of my latest Field and Stream cover of the trout image. I'm really excited about this one. It's a great image. I think it's going to make a great print. So check them out and get yours at ryankirby.com.